Hi, I'm Paul from the Studio AXE. What I thought I'd do in today's video is to compare an AXE FX 3 and a Kemper Profiler. Now, I know they're very different things, but primarily they do the same thing. They basically create guitar sounds. The differences between the two are that with a Kemper, you take a snapshot of your amp, so exactly how that amp sounds at that particular time, store it inside the Kemper, and then use that sound or the snapshot of that sound any given time. The AXE FX 3 is a modeler. Now what that means is it's a model of an amplifier. It's a digitally created model of an amplifier that then you can change all the parameters of that amplifier, and it should react in a similar way to the way that the amplifier would. In the AXE FX, I've loaded up a model of a Friedman Dirty Shirley, and in the Kemper I've loaded up a profile of a Dirty Shirley. So they should sound roughly the same. So here's the Dirty Shirley inside the AXE FX. And here's the Dirty Shirley inside the Kemper. Now, before we start looking at sounds, let's have a look at the difference in the amount of processing in the AXE FX 3 compared to the Kemper. The AXE FX 3 is, I think it's about 4 years old, while the Kemper is about 12 years old. So there's a massive difference in technology that's moved on in all those years. With the AXE FX, you've got 14 rows along the top and 6 rows on the side. Now you can load in amplifiers and effects into all of those slots. Now the processing in the AXE FX 3 is so vast, you're never going to run out of processing to create your guitar sounds. In the AXE FX 3, you can load up effects into each of these slots, and you're not restricted to where you want to put your amplifiers or effects. Right, let's have a look at the Kemper. Now in the Kemper, it's really nicely laid out, but what you've got here, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks before your amplifier and 4 blocks after your amplifier. Now you can load up effects into each of these blocks, but you can't move where the amplifier is. So say you want a bunch of effects, or you want 8 effects after the amplifier, you can't do that. You can have 4 blocks before the amp and 4 blocks afterwards. And to be honest, for most applications, that's absolutely fine, but there is a massive difference between the amount of processing power, as I said, between the AXE FX and the Kemper. I've plugged back into the AXE FX, and what I want to demonstrate is the amount of difference with dynamics going into the AXE FX than going into the Kemper. Now with the AXE FX, it behaves like an amp. So the lighter you play, you get loads of dynamics, you can play really clean. And then you can drive the amp by picking harder. Now let's plug into the Kemper. Now with the Kemper, even though there is no compressor that I've got loaded into any of the slots, and there's no compression going on, the Kemper feels more compressed. You definitely haven't got the range of dynamics that you've got with the AXE FX. Because the Kemper takes a snapshot of that amplifier, it doesn't actually store the gain circuit of that amp. So when you turn up the gain, it's using the sound of the gain inside the Kemper to adjust the sound of the profile. Now what I mean by that is that you would get a completely different sound if you turned up the gain on a Dirty Shirley than you would on a profile. So let's turn up the gain. Now it doesn't sound bad, and at a gig, if you need to turn the gain up on a particular amplifier, it will do, but it adds a massive amount of low end that is completely overpowering. So what you've then got to do is to adjust that profile and bring back the bass on that profile just to make it sound, you know, like a similar amp. Now let's do the same with the AXE FX. So that's a really good thing about the AXE FX, because it's modelled on an amplifier. You're not taking a snapshot, so you're not storing that particular picture, if you want, of an amplifier. You've actually got the full range of the amplifier's controls. Now, whether you think it sounds like that particular amplifier is a different argument, but all of the controls inside the AXE FX on particular amp models react like an amplifier would. Just a quick interruption. 73% of the people that watch my videos aren't actually subscribers. If you're getting something out of these videos, like and subscribe, click on the bell button, and you'll be doing me a big favour, and you'll also be notified of any future video that comes out from the Studio Rats. Right, back to the video. So let's talk about ease of use. If you look at the front panel on the AXE FX, it's a bit of a minefield, to be honest. There's so much going on, and to be honest, it's not the easiest to adjust. If you're at a gig and you need to play around with some of the sounds, you've got to deep dive inside of menus. Now, if you look at the Kemper, on the other hand, the Kemper's got controls of a standard amplifier on the front. You've got your gain, your bass, your treble, your presence, and you can also adjust the reverb and some of the effects from the front panel. In my opinion, Kemper is much easier to use. Now let's compare the effects between the two. First of all, we'll start with like an overdrive pedal. If I go to the drive inside the AXE FX3, I've got this Tone of Kings loaded up, which is a King of Tone style pedal, and it sounds like this. Now let's do the same with the Kemper. If I go onto my second block here, I'm going to change this. Let's change it to the same type of pedal. And I'm going to choose this King Overdrive, which is their King of Tone. Now, personally, I think that's a great drive tone, and I really like the way it sounds. But here's the thing about the Kemper, it does sound compressed. Now, when you put these sort of pedal models in front of the Kemper, it compresses even more. And I'm going to demonstrate that by putting a pedal in front of it. If I turn off the Kemper drive and I put like a proper overdrive pedal in front of it, I'm using my Thorpe Peacekeeper. It handles pedals absolutely fine, but again, you're losing those dynamics. If I play really lightly, then I play loud, the volume is exactly the same. Now let's try the same thing with the AXE FX. So I've got the same pedal plugged into the AXE FX. It sounds like this. The AXE FX handles pedals in a completely different way. That feels like you've plugged a pedal straight into the front of the amp. All the dynamics are still there. If I play lightly. It saturates in the same way the front end of an amp would. Lastly, let's have a look at the quality of the effects between the AXE FX and the Kemper. I'm not going to go through loads and loads of different effects. I'm just going to look at reverbs, and we'll just look at like a shimmer style reverb. If I go to this scene, quality of the effects inside the AXE FX are unbelievable. They're really, really top notch. Now obviously with the Kemper it's a much older unit, but Kemper are really good at providing updates and they're constantly updating the effects. Now the effects might not be as good, but they do sound great. So what is the AXE FX and the Kemper both good for? Well, for me personally, with the Kemper, if you're recording a guitar tone in the studio, you can capture that particular guitar tone, and then if you need to do any overdubs, you can do that. Or if you want to take that exact sound out live, you can do that. Now, it's not going to perform exactly the same way as your amplifier would. The dynamics of the amplifier to the Kemper are not going to be the same, but you're going to have that sound and you can take it out live, or again, use it again in the studio. The AXE FX, you can get basically any sound you want from it, and you can create those sounds and it reacts like an amplifier, it sounds like an amplifier, it performs like an amplifier, and when you put pedals in front of it, again, it behaves like an amplifier would. It sounds absolutely amazing. If I used an AXE FX or a Kemper on a recording, would anybody be able to tell the difference? Or would anyone say, well, that's a great guitar tone and that's not a great guitar tone? Absolutely not. They both do really fantastic jobs at creating really great guitar tones. But the difference is the feel. If you want your processor, if you want your guitar processor to feel like an amplifier, then the AXE FX is the way to go. If you want to capture the sound of an amplifier, then the Kemper is the way to go. But personally, both are great. And to be honest, the Kemper, as I said, is 12 years old and it still sounds fantastic. Anyway, I really hope you guys got something out of this. If you did get something out of it, don't forget to like and subscribe. Click on the bell button and you'll be notified of any future video that comes out from the Studio Rats. I'm Paul and I'll see you next time. Cheers.